17 degrees outside a highway rest area near Flagstaff, Arizona, 11 o'clock at night. Down in the city, thousands of retirees are lying awake running the same numbers they run every month, rent against pension, and coming up short. But in the last row of that parking lot, behind the curtained windows of a 22-year-old Chevy Express, a 67-year-old retired electrician is sound asleep under a down comforter, warm, safe, and completely debt-free in a home that cost him less than most riding mowers. However, daily life inside these $2,000 vans, the freedom and the parts the tours never show you, looks nothing like what you think. The road to that parking lot starts in Anchorage, Alaska, in the middle of the 1990s, with a grocery store clerk named Bob Wells. A divorce left Wells with child support payments and a paycheck that could cover his kids or an apartment, never both. He ran the arithmetic until the arithmetic ran out of mercy, then bought an old box van, parked it, and moved in, ashamed and convinced his life was over. Instead, something unexpected happened. With no rent devouring his check, the panic that had lived on his chest for years slowly lifted. He had money at the end of the month for the first time in his adult life, and he started asking a question almost nobody in America was asking out loud. What if the housing everyone insists you need is the very thing keeping you broke? In 2005, Wells put his lessons on a plain website called Cheap RV Living. Hardly anyone noticed until the 2008 crash wiped out retirement accounts, and suddenly grandmothers were emailing a former grocery clerk in Alaska asking how to live in a Prius. In 2010, Wells invited his readers to meet in the desert outside Quartzsite, Arizona, a gathering he called the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous. Within a decade, it drew thousands of vehicles, and Hollywood came calling. Wells played himself in Nomadland, which won Best Picture and put his quiet movement on every screen in America. But the movie shows you the sunsets. It does not show you the driveway where this life actually begins. So go back to that electrician sleeping outside Flagstaff, because his van tells you exactly what $2,000 buys. The Chevy Express itself came off the back row of a used lot in Phoenix, a retired plumbing company van with faded lettering, high miles, and a perfectly healthy engine, $1,400 after some patient haggling. The remaining $600 became the home, built in his daughter's driveway over one long weekend with his grandson holding the drill. A sheet of plywood on a simple frame became the bed platform, with storage tubs sliding underneath. Pink foam board from the hardware store, cut with a kitchen knife and glued to the bare metal walls, became the insulation. Reflective window covers went behind the curtains to hold heat in January and bounce it away in July. A two-burner Coleman Camp stove became the kitchen, a cooler became the refrigerator, and a deep-cycle marine battery wired to a folding solar panel on the dashboard became the power company. By Sunday evening, there was a made bed, a battery lantern, and a framed photo of his late wife screwed to the wall so it could never fall while driving. One man's entire housing problem solved in a driveway, badly or brilliantly depending on who you ask. So what actually happens the first night you slide that door shut? Nearly everyone reports the same first shock, and strangely, the shock is the quiet. After decades of humming refrigerators and forced air furnaces, a parked van on a still street is so silent that people lie there listening to their own breathing like it belongs to a stranger. Then the van starts teaching lessons. On a cold night, warm breath rises and meets cold sheet metal, and by morning, The ceiling above the bed has grown a skin of moisture that lets go one drop at a time. The community calls it the indoor drizzle, and every beginner wakes up to it exactly once before learning to crack a window and accept the cold trade. Rain is the opposite discovery. On a metal roof, a storm sounds enormous, and yet person after person swears that rain drumming above their bed knocks them out faster than anything in the medicine cabinet ever did. A van also enforces a discipline no house ever demanded. Everything owned must have a place, and that place must survive a left turn. New van dwellers learn this the first time they touch the brakes, and the entire pantry arrives in the front seat. Within a month, most own less than they have owned since childhood, and more than a few describe standing in a storage unit packed with furniture they once fought to afford, realizing they miss none of it, and handing back the key. Then there is the knock. Park on a city street long enough, and it comes at 2 or 3 in the morning, a flashlight through the curtain and a voice saying, "Move along." City van dwellers develop a craft they call stealth. Plain white vans, no stickers, blackout curtains, arrive after dark, leave before the neighborhood wakes. Several describe those years the same way, as living like a polite ghost. And there is the question every curious relative asks first, the bathroom. The honest answer is a bucket with a sealing lid, a bottle for the middle of the night, and a $5 a month gym membership for showers. Nobody honest tries to glamorize it. A 70-year-old widow living in a Dodge Grand Caravan put it plainly in an interview. The farmhouse she grew up in had an outhouse 40 feet from the back door, and her van bathroom is closer than that, so by her math she has come out ahead. Everything changes the day a van dweller finally leaves the city and points the hood at public land, because this is where the word homeless stops describing anything. The American West holds hundreds of millions of acres managed by the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service, where camping is free for 14 days at a stretch. Out there, the knock does not exist. The parking spot is a mesa with a 100-mile view. Mornings begin with coffee on the tailgate while the desert turns gold, and the nights get so dark the Milky Way throws shadows. One retired long-haul trucker said he spent 40 years driving past the most beautiful country on earth at 70 miles an hour, and now he lives in it. Days out there settle into a rhythm. Mornings are chores in the cool hours, checking the solar panel, topping water jugs, sweeping a plywood floor that takes 90 seconds to clean. Midday means town, the laundromat, the library for internet and air conditioning, the water spigot behind the gas station at $0.25 a gallon. Afternoons are naps and paperback westerns in a camp chair. Evenings are dinner on the camp stove and radio in the dark. What rattles newcomers most is that no bill, no landlord, and no alarm clock is organizing any of it anymore. The month simply sits there, empty, waiting to be filled. And a few people find that so unnerving they retreat to an apartment within weeks. The calendar works differently too. Van dwellers do not fight the seasons, they follow them. A migration the community calls chasing 70 degrees. Winter means the low deserts of Arizona and Southern California, where January afternoons feel like May. Spring pulls the caravans north through Utah's red rock country. Summer means the high forests of Colorado, Oregon, and Idaho, where a van with no air conditioning sleeps perfectly at 8,000 feet. Then October turns the aspens gold, and the whole loose nation of vans drifts south again like geese. A man who spent 40 winters shoveling a Michigan driveway described his first migration simply. He woke up in the desert on a February morning, drank his coffee outside in a t-shirt, and cried because nobody had ever told him escaping winter was something ordinary people were allowed to do. And here is the part that stuns the financial planners. The math mostly works. Van dwellers on Social Security routinely report total monthly costs between $500 and $800. Gas, food, insurance, phone, and the gym membership included. The average one-bedroom apartment in an American city costs more than that in rent alone before a single light turns on. A retiree drawing $1,500 a month, a number that spells slow disaster in any city, is comfortably middle class on a mesa in Arizona, and something happens to a person the first month the rent never comes due. Teeth get fixed, calls to the kids run longer, doctor appointments stop getting canceled. Some of these retirees are saving money for the first time since the 1980s. Now, a quick pause for the people watching who are not just curious. Some of you are running that rent against pension math right now and losing. Some of you have a brother or a neighbor already sleeping in a car. And a heartbreaking number of the people on America's public lands tonight are military veterans. On any given night, more than 30,000 American veterans have no home at all. We put together a guide called the Veterans Blueprint that walks through the emergency housing programs, benefits, and lesser-known assistance strategies that can keep a struggling veteran or anyone close to the edge off the street entirely. There is far more in it than a video like this can cover properly, so the full guide lives at the link in the description. If things are tight, it may change your next 6 months, and if you want to help someone else, it shows you exactly where to start. To understand what this life actually gives a person, forget the movement for a minute and follow one woman. Remember the widow in the Dodge Grand Caravan. Her husband died 6 years ago, and the day he died, the household income was nearly cut in half while the rent was not. She had kept the same apartment spotless for 20 years, and at 64 she was priced out of it by a spreadsheet. Her son helped her build out the caravan in his garage, both of them pretending it was an adventure, and neither of them believing it. She spent her first month on the road braced like a woman waiting for a punch, and then the first of the month arrived, and nothing came to collect. She says she sat in a Walmart parking lot in Yuma and laughed until she scared herself. The second month, she slept 8 hours for the first time since the funeral. A retired machinist at Quartzsite once said that in his last apartment, he had become a rent payment with a body attached. And she says that is exactly the person she stopped being somewhere on Interstate 10. These days, she winters with the same little camp of widows outside Quartzsite, showers at the Planet Fitness in town, and spends her mornings teaching frightened new arrivals how to glue foam board to a van wall without wrecking it. She is also what the movement actually looks like now, because the picture in most people's heads, young couples with drone cameras and yoga mats, died years ago. Drive into Quartzsite in January, and the median resident looks less like an influencer and more like your retired aunt. The over 55 crowd is the fastest growing group on the road, filled with people who did everything right for 40 years and watched the cost of a roof outrun them anyway. Many fund the life with seasonal work, hosting campgrounds all summer or working warehouse shifts through programs built specifically to recruit RV and van dwellers, an entire migrant workforce of grandparents most of the country has never heard of. In winter, tens of thousands of them converge on the desert around Quartzsite, where a long-term camping permit runs about $180 for the entire season, and the sagebrush fills with campfires, potlucks, and men in their 70s arguing cheerfully about carburetors. Plenty of people look at all of this and see something shameful, and they deserve a fair hearing, because some of them are living it. Critics call the movement homelessness with better marketing, a country quietly training its old people to be grateful for a parking space. A van has no plumbing, no address most agencies will accept, and no room for a wheelchair on the day a body finally demands one. Climbing down from a bed platform at 74 with two bad knees is one thing in July and something else on an icy morning. A breakdown means your entire house is on a tow truck, and a $1,200 transmission can end the whole life in an afternoon. Cities keep passing ordinances against sleeping in vehicles, closing safe overnight lots faster than charities can open them. Winter kills people in vans every single year, and the loneliest voices on the road will tell you the hardest sound in van life is not the knock on the window. It is the silence when nobody knocks at all, week after week, because you parked so far out that no one on earth knows where you are. Every word of that is true, and yet the criticism usually arrives from a heated living room aimed at people who ran out of heated living rooms they could afford. The same country lecturing a 70-year-old about the indignity of a bucket toilet is the country that priced her out of the apartment she kept spotless for 2 decades. Against that, the desert offers its own evidence. At the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous, new arrivals, many recently widowed and visibly frightened, are absorbed within days into camps that check on them every morning. There are seminars on solar wiring and Social Security, free hot meals, and mechanics who crawl under strangers' vans for the cost of parts. Which brings this story to a camp chair. Out at the widows' camp near Quartzsite, every person has a spot at the morning fire, and the unwritten rule is simple. If your chair sits empty past coffee, somebody walks over and taps on your van before the pot goes cold. 11 years at her old address, the widow says, and not one neighbor ever learned her name. Out here, her absence would be noticed in under an hour. Nothing about a $2,000 caravan shows up in any housing statistic as a success. The chair does not show up anywhere at all. But ask her which one saved her life. And somewhere north of her, at that rest area outside Flagstaff, dawn is coming up gray and cold, and the retired electrician is awake, making coffee on the tailgate with his breath showing, his wife's photo still bolted to the wall behind him. In an hour, he will point the Chevy south toward the desert, toward people who know his name, in a paid-for home no landlord can raise, no bank can call, and no market crash can take. The vans are not the answer to America's housing crisis, and the people driving them say so themselves. What they prove is smaller and harder to dismiss, that for the price of a used work van and a weekend in a driveway, a person this country gave up on can get back warmth, sleep, and someone who checks the chair. The Veteran's Blueprint stays linked in the description for anyone who needs it or knows someone who does. And if you want more true stories about ordinary Americans quietly solving impossible problems, subscribe. Because next week, we are climbing aboard the retired school buses that grandparents are converting into $3,000 rolling homes. Behind one church in Tennessee, we found a bus with a wood stove, a full pantry, and a waiting list. That story is next. Subscribe.